So we all know that the world was created with some kind of a format that was supposed to teach the person, especially the Torah is supposed to teach the person how to take physical pleasure to a spiritual pleasure, for the pleasure of the neshama. I mean, that's what we eat, and we make brachot, and we make mitzvot, and so on and so forth. But together with that, we see that most people don't. Most people are after physical desires, and a person who is more physical, the memory of the pleasures that he had in the past just increases appetite to have more, and by doing so, feeling that he doesn't have enough. So he needs more, he needs more, he needs more, he needs more. But so something is wrong with that. We should know that the combination of or high centers of pleasure not only are elevating the magnitude of the pleasure, but also overcome the boredom that we have by having a certain habit all the time. So that's why you need always new food, and you want to try new things, and so on and so forth. Many people will be very upset if they serve them, let's say, rice and beans every single day.
Why?
Because they get bored of it. Because it's not
exciting.
They haven't internalized something that we're trying to say. So let's say, for example, people want, let's make it interesting. Let's have Indian food. Indian food, the Indian eats dal and chapati all day long. He doesn't seem to have a problem with this. We have a problem. We need to. So something is missing in the way we process our pleasures, or we process our experiences altogether.
Is it a bad thing in a bad way?
In a bad way, yes, in a bad way. We're processing it in the wrong way. So it's in a bad way. In the wrong way. Now, what happens is that by able to connecting spiritual and physical, we are overcoming the loss that we have in physical arousement of whatever we're experiencing right now. And it's something that we maybe know, but sometimes fail. Especially us, people who keep Torah and mitzvot. Now, the difference will be, for example, also if you eat in a different way and so on and so forth, and what we call achila gasa, eating in a non-appropriate way. Or let's say, for example, I give you a good bottle of wine, I don't know, a nice bottle of wine, something like really expensive. Your experience will be completely different if you sip it slowly, or you take the whole bottle of wine and jug it like this. Or if I'll give you, a meal that you're just going to shove into your mouth, or just something that you're going to sample slowly. Right? There's a whole different experience when you're going like that. If you remember what we just dealing with, when we fall into the world of Gashmiyut, in that matter we call it the matrix, right? Into the world of Gashmiyut, in the world of illusion that we're living on, where this world really has a lot of temptations in terms of desires and all kind of experiences, and it's really all sense, but the senses, the arousal of the senses that we have has to be strong smell. It has to be very powerful taste. And I don't know if you noticed that in recent years, more and more people eat spicy food, where before they never ate spicy food. Because, you love spicy food. But you should know that probably your grandmother did not eat spicy food. Most likely. They had different types of food. Their food was different. We need that more. Something is happening in the transformation of us from what we used to be to what we are now.
Meaning we like to try new things all the time? Meaning trying new things and not being satisfied? It's
not that we're trying things. We are not combining a spiritual element with the physical element that we're having. So just bear with me until the end. Hold on. So now, this world that we have in here is the world of... No, you can ask questions, it's fine. But just listen until the end. The world that we are dealing with here is really the world of nisyonot, trials. We're always being tested and trials and so on and so forth. And as we could see, If you remember the woman in red by the Matrix, right? He was walking in the street. He wasn't paying attention to the people, just bouncing into people. All of a sudden, he sees that blonde with the red dress, right, looking like that. He's really being explained that was made for one reason and one reason only, is to really divert him from his path. That thing that he saw, this gorgeous woman, I don't think she was so pretty, but the blonde with the red dress, because if you notice, everybody was wearing black and white. But all of a sudden, this red dress woman with blonde hair, which is the opposite of everything else, was meant for one thing only, to direct him out of his path. Once you realize that, it's not so difficult to overcome the test, because if you would realize that she is that red dressed lady is really the agent Smith, the Yetzer Hara that you have, well, you're going to be careful not to go. If you would realize that all this arousal or bombardment of your senses that you have are really here for one thing only, is to divert you from your path, you're going to act completely different. You're going to stay away from it rather than trying to pursue it. And that's something that is very, very important. You might say that maybe this it was just like a little, nick in the road. But you should know, I think the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that any diversion of a millimeter on your gun here, the longer the bullet will travel, the furthest the miss. So if I'm on target right now, and I'm going to move it by a millimeter, the further I go, if I go a mile away, that millimeter manifests itself into 100 meters. It's pretty big. You need to be on target all the time. You cannot divert from your path, even with a nick, because the longer you live and the more you do it, the bigger or further away from the target you're going to be. And we all need to be on target. Now, how do we do that? We need to really connect all the time ourselves to ruchniut, to spirituality. When we become a machine that all it does is obsessed with physical possessions and physical desires and physical pleasures, and we are not incorporating, and we have to incorporate the two opposing forces, the physical and the spiritual, but we need to take the physical and elevate it through the spiritual up to a higher level of awareness. If we don't do that, we fall into the matrix and we disappear. We become a part of this big scheme and we get lost. And that's what happens to most people. And that's what happens to many people in marriage life. Now the woman in red dress, is the enemy that each and every one of us have, especially when it comes down to marriage. Now, the more you will incorporate the higher spiritual centers of pleasure or experiences, you're going to experience longer and more powerful pleasure altogether. For example, if you eat a meal in Pesach, right, we have a Seudah, we elevate it from a very behemoth thing. What do? We eat lettuce like a bunch of goats, and, eating like behemoth, right? And we elevate it to a spiritual party, a spiritual celebration of going out from avdut lecherut, from slavery to freedom. That's a spiritual thing. Because ultimately, slavery at its most vicious form is a slavery of the mind, of the spirit, not of the body. Now, because of that, we know, for example, that achila gasa, eating like an animal, lav shmei achila, it's not considered to be achila, because it's not achila ruchanit. But how do I do it? I need to be aware of the goal at the end, and then I'm directing what I'm having here towards that goal. I know where I need to be, and I direct all my action towards that goal. Sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila. You need to think about your action with the end in mind, not putting one foot after the other and see whatever it takes us. You have to have a plan. You have to make sure you don't get lost. Or, for example, the unification of a man and his wife, a husband and a wife, right? Which is a complete expression of the connection of spiritual elements in the highest form. We call that yichud, unification, and we call Hashem yichud kudsha, also yichud. So the most behemoth thing as having relations, it's like animals. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu created such pleasure? You think, for example, a cow eats grass, you go, that grass is good. That seems like Montana's grass, you know. No, it's grass. We eat and we enjoy. We have sex and we enjoy. Why is that? Because if it wasn't with such pleasure, we would not eat and we would not multiply, and that is needed for our existence. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu implanted that in such a way for us to encourage us to it, but we need to make sure that we don't fall down to it, but rather we take those actions and we elevate them up. So a connection of a husband and wife is one like that, and therefore combining, l'shalev, to combine, is what we call here the name of the game. The meaning of combining is that love is not only nice and pleasurable, life is something greater than that. Life is a spiritual value that is important to me, that I'm obligated to. Now, in our society, romance is not what it really is. It's very fake. Romance is very fake. It's all commercialized. It's not it does not allow you self-expression. You know, you have to buy things on whatever it is, Valentine's Day, and you have to buy things here, and you have to buy things there. And we define, for example, what making love is. When I told you this many times, for example, if a person wants to make love to his wife, it's not necessarily the action, the physical action. Making love for your wife is, for example, taking her pajamas in the winter and putting on the radio to warm up. That is an action of love. You wash the dishes for her on Shabbat when their hands are freezing. You help her out. That's an act of love. So what happens when I'm doing that? I'm making love. And that's why when a woman keeps taharat mishpacha, you could increase the love between the husband and wife so much. Because it's pure now, it's beyond the physical. Now let's see what you're really worth. What's your kesher, your connection is really worth. There's no physical aspect, it's all spiritual. So I don't understand the people who like to cut corners. Actually, I do know why they do that. But it's such a shame that they don't understand when they try to cut corners on issues of taharat mishpacha and keeping shiva nekiim and so on and so forth. Don't you want to prolong the experience? Why are you so driven by the physical? You can elevate it anyway. And when you don't elevate things, you sink. There's nothing staying in the same level. Your life is all a compartment of so many actions put together. You would never stay in the same level. Either you're up or you're down. So it's something very important to remember. Now, the connection between a husband and wife has 3 levels in it, right? Slowly, by staying loyal, trust, and keeping the same husband and wife for a long time, you really build, a multi-level, fitting. You fit in each other multi-levels, which is the guf, the nefesh, and the ruach, the body, the soul, and the spirit. In order for this building to be stable for a long time, you really need to separate the lower floor from the upper ones, and you need to separate that from destructive influences that come from the outside. In other words, competition and so on and so forth. When you reach that level of unifying or building your relationship on those 3 levels, that's called a brit, that's called a covenant. And that covenant is that I do not compare the lower level, which is the physical, to other external objects. In other words, my wife is my wife and that's it. I don't care who is out there. I don't care how they look. I don't compare this to that. Even if you had multiple partners before you were married, you should never compare. That's why it's good not to have multiple partners, because it's very difficult for us to not compare one to the other. So you should learn to appreciate the person for who he is, standing in front of, she is standing in front of you now, not comparing to somebody else. Only what you have, what you see is what you get, kind of a thing. In other words, when I'm aware of the perfection of the connection and all three levels, that could happen. This kind of a connection will take time and investment to build, and you cannot compare it by glimpsing, oh, let me see what they're doing, or let me see what they're doing. How come they're doing it and we're not doing it? And that's what most people do. They don't pay enough attention to their relationship. They don't invest into their relationship. They always compare what other people are doing. Oh, they went to the Bahamas for Pesach. How come we're not going? Are they moving to Great Neck? How come we're not moving? They're doing this. What do you care what they're doing? Do you want him to be your husband? Do you want her to be your wife? Why are you looking at? And again, that's why it's very bad to have, multiple partners before you were married, because you always, oh, he did to me this, she did to me that. It's destructive before we even started. Destructive even before we started, because we can't break away from that cycle of comparing all the time. In other words, you are now a world of your own. You can't compare to anything else. Now, in this fake romance of our society, that really, one of the slogans of is love would win, or love will prevail, right? That's not true. Our romance, the way we express that, is very fake. It pushes the to internal competition all the time, and does not understand one thing, and one thing simple, that in our body there are two different types of nerve system. Sympathetic and parasympathetic. That's it. Man, you knew it. He's a doctor. That's it. So one operates in the time that we are resting, for example, digestion and so on and so forth, and the other one operates during times of war, right? When we need all this adrenaline and the superpower to fight all the time, or in order to run away, the fight or flight kind of a system. Now, all the medicines and all those things will tell you that a person in our society really lives in a very stressful environment, very stressful society. That's why our body feels all the time like it's in a war. And in a reality like that, only the fight or flight system works, the other one does not. So slowly what happens, your body does not get the proper nourishments and proper processes that happens in the body, and then you break down and fall. That's what stress does to you. Spiritual or emotional system are similar to that. And when a person lives where all the time you're being challenged in your marriage life, what they call it in Israel zugiyut, in your marital life, slowly it will fall and break, because there's always excitement, there's always arousal, and always challenges that are not healthy for you. Now, when you don't understand that, when you fail to understand that, you fall into a very, very difficult state of destruction, of disappointment from your relationship and from life itself. You have to understand, and we'll expand on it maybe some other time, that love is not the goal. Love is the means to reach the truth. But we will have to speak about it some other time. So what I'm trying to tell you here with today's exercise is reduce the amount of external arousal and stimulate that you experience. Try to focus your point, your effort into elevating yourself spiritually, to incorporate more spirituality in your actions. For example, eat only when you're hungry. When you eat, make a bracha. Understand why you're eating. In other words, be aware of what's going on. You have to do so. Be'ezrat Hashem, when you marry a wife and get a husband or whatever it is that you guys are doing, that's the one. And therefore nobody else matters. That's the one. That's my other half. And we need to expand on that in some other time. So maybe Be'ezrat Hashem will do it. Last word is, be careful from the woman in the red dress. Have a good day.